On the afternoon before Thanksgiving, 1971, a man walked up to an airline counter in Portland, Oregon. He was unremarkable in almost every way, middle-aged, wearing a dark business suit, a black tie, and a white shirt. He paid cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle, Washington. He gave his name as Dan Cooper. Nobody at that counter had any reason to look at him twice. Within hours, his name, slightly misreported by the press as D.B. Cooper, would become one of the most enduring mysteries in the history of American crime. Boarding Flight 305. Cooper boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a Boeing 727 bound for Seattle. He took a seat near the back of the plane, ordered a bourbon and soda from the flight attendant, and waited calmly as the aircraft prepared for departure. To anyone watching, he looked like just another business traveler heading home for the holiday. Shortly after takeoff, everything changed. Cooper passed a folded note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. Assuming it was simply a phone number, she slipped it into her pocket without reading it, a common occurrence for an attractive young flight attendant in 1971. Cooper leaned over and quietly told her to read the note. She did. It said he had a bomb in his briefcase, and that he wanted her to sit beside him. She sat down. Cooper opened the briefcase just enough for her to see inside. A tangle of wires connected to red cylindrical sticks arranged in a way that convinced her, and later the entire crew, that the threat was real. He then calmly dictated his demands, asking her to write them down. The demands, Cooper's requests, were oddly specific and oddly reasonable for a man threatening to blow up a commercial airliner. He wanted $200,000 in cash, a fortune in 1971 equivalent to well over $1 million today. He wanted 4 parachutes, and he wanted them ready and waiting when the plane landed in Seattle. The pilot radioed ahead. Northwest Orient Airlines, working with the FBI, agreed to meet every demand. They didn't want to risk the lives of the passengers or crew over money that was ultimately insured. While authorities scrambled to gather the ransom and the parachutes, Flight 305 was forced into a holding pattern above Seattle, circling for nearly 2 hours. Passengers on board had no idea what was happening in the rear of the aircraft. As far as they knew, this was simply a delayed flight, landing in Seattle. When the plane finally landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport, Cooper's instructions were followed to the letter. A single airline employee approached the aircraft and delivered a bag containing $200,000 in $20 bills, along with 4 parachutes, exactly as requested. In exchange, Cooper released all 36 passengers and 2 of the flight attendants, keeping only the pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, and 1 flight attendant aboard. With the ransom and parachutes secured, he gave the flight crew a new set of instructions: fly toward Mexico City at a low altitude with the landing gear down and the rear staircase of the aircraft lowered and unlocked. It was an unusual, almost impossible set of demands for a commercial jet. But the crew, still believing a bomb was on board, complied. Somewhere over Washington, the Boeing 727 took off again, climbing slowly into the darkening evening sky, flying low and slow exactly as Cooper had demanded. Rain poured outside. The rear staircase, now lowered, created a howling wind throughout the cabin. Sometime between Seattle and Reno, Nevada, the exact location has never been determined, a warning light in the cockpit indicated the rear stairway had been activated. Cooper had jumped. Wearing his business suit, carrying the money bag tied shut with parachute cord, He stepped out of the aircraft into the freezing, rain-soaked night sky somewhere over the dense forests of southwestern Washington state. He was never seen again. The search what followed was one of the largest manhunts in American history up to that point. The FBI, along with local and state law enforcement, launched a massive ground and air search across the rugged, densely forested terrain where Cooper was believed to have landed. They found nothing. No parachute, no body, no footprints. No sign that a man had crashed through the tree canopy or wandered out of the wilderness. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist the moment he stepped out of that aircraft. The FBI gave the case an official name, NORJAC, short for Northwest Hijacking. It would become one of the longest-running investigations in the Bureau's history. Building the case, investigators worked methodically. They interviewed hundreds of people who might have known or encountered someone matching Cooper's description. They studied the physical evidence left behind on the plane, his clip-on tie, a few cigarette butts, and little else. They calculated wind patterns, plane speeds, and altitude to estimate a probable drop zone, searching that area repeatedly over the following years. By the 5th anniversary of the hijacking, the FBI had considered more than 800 possible suspects. The vast majority were eliminated through alibis, physical descriptions that didn't match, or simple lack of evidence. A small handful remained persistent possibilities for decades. One name that surfaces again and again in discussions of the case is Richard Floyd McCoy, a Vietnam veteran and skilled skydiver who carried out a strikingly similar hijacking less than 5 months later, in April 1972. McCoy was caught, convicted and imprisoned, but many investigators over the years have wondered whether he might have been responsible for the original Cooper hijacking as well. He always denied it, and inconsistencies in his physical description compared to eyewitness accounts have kept this theory unresolved. A startling discovery. For 9 years, the case remained completely cold, with no physical evidence beyond what had been left on the plane itself. Then, in February 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging in the sandy riverbank along the Columbia River during a family picnic. He uncovered a decaying, disintegrating packet of $20 bills, partially buried in the sand. When the serial numbers were checked against FBI records, they matched a portion of the ransom money given to Cooper nearly a decade earlier. This discovery reignited public and investigative interest in the case, but it also deepened the mystery rather than solving it. How had the money ended up there, miles from the presumed jump zone? Had Cooper drowned in the river, with the current slowly depositing the cash over the years? Or had someone else, entirely unconnected to the hijacking, somehow come into possession of a portion of the ransom? To this day, no one knows for certain. Newly released files. Decades later, the FBI has continued to release previously classified files related to the case, revealing new potential suspects that had quietly been investigated over the years. One such individual, a former Boeing aircraft inspector and pilot named Raymond Sidney Russell, was interviewed by the FBI in 1972 as a person of interest. Russell had extensive aviation experience and physically resembled some witness descriptions. However, he told investigators he had never flown on a Boeing 727, the exact aircraft model that was hijacked, and was ultimately eliminated as a suspect. In more recent years, the surviving family members of other suspects have come forward with claims and evidence suggesting their own late relatives may have been the true hijacker. None of these claims have ever been definitively proven. The end of the active investigation. After 45 years of dead ends, false leads, and thousands of pages of investigative files, the FBI made an announcement on July 8, 2016. The Bureau would no longer actively pursue the D.B. Cooper case. Every credible lead had been exhaustively reviewed. Every identified witness had been interviewed. Every piece of physical evidence had been examined and re-examined using every forensic technique available across 4.5 decades. The case was not officially closed. Technically, it remains open, but active investigation had reached its end. All evidence collected over the decades was preserved for historical purposes at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., including that one small, unremarkable clip-on tie Cooper left behind on the plane, a mystery without an ending. To this day, D.B. Cooper's hijacking remains the only unsolved commercial airline hijacking in the history of United States aviation. No one knows his real name. No one knows whether he survived that jump into the freezing, rain-soaked darkness over the forests of Washington state. No one knows what happened to the majority of the $200,000 he took with him. He has become something close to an American folk legend, celebrated at annual festivals, referenced in films, books, and documentaries, admired by some as a kind of gentleman outlaw who pulled off the impossible and vanished without a trace. But behind the legend is a simple, unresolved truth. A man boarded a plane using a fake name, threatened to kill everyone on board, took a fortune in cash, and then stepped out into the night sky, never to be seen or heard from again. More than 50 years later, D.B. Cooper remains exactly what he was the moment he disappeared into the clouds, a complete and total mystery.